So good to be back with you live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And we are super pumped because today we have a special guest with us all the way up from the Boston, Massachusetts area. Ken, give a little wave because you're already on camera. Yes, Ken Stearns is the CEO of Great Practices, and we're going to talk a little bit about some ideas he has for healthcare practitioners right now in this COVID era that we are in. But first, let me get you up to speed on what's happening outside of my window. Actually, both Ken and I are going through a huge thunderstorm at the moment. So if we have moments where it gets a little darker than you'd like, stick with us. Hopefully we won't lose any connectivity. For those of you who have never been with us, we are live each and every week talking about how to look good and sound good on camera, specifically for healthcare practices in this new world that we're living in, where virtual is the go-to place to have all of your in-person meetings. You liked my air quotes? My name is Michelle Berto. I'm a former television news anchor, and that's what I've been doing for the past almost 10 years is teaching entrepreneurs, small business owners, lawyers, and now mostly healthcare professionals how to look good and sound good on camera. And now that is more important than ever before. We are weaving the world of traditional and non-traditional media into industries that may have never thought that they would have these skill sets intertwined with theirs. I'm speaking directly to all of the medical professionals out there, which is how Ken and I originally met. Another fellow comrade on LinkedIn. We started to communicate back and forth with one another as we saw the future for healthcare having this pathway of both media and financial and business expertise leading the way on how to provide exceptional healthcare. So Ken, let me bring you back into the conversation right now. Tell everybody where you're located, who your current clients are. You don't have to name them, but where you spend most of your time in what industry.
All right. Well, I'm Ken Stern of Great Practices. I help doctors drive profitability. I work with doctors in private practice. If they're in a big system, they have their own people to take care of what I do. Basically deal with a lot of the office tasks that have nothing to do with delivery of healthcare, but everything to do with maintaining a business and being able to deliver tomorrow. I'm located in the Boston area, but I can deliver my services really anywhere because most of it is works through the cloud, just the way I'm right. Working with Michelle now. She's in Florida. I'm in Massachusetts.
Yes. I think it's always interesting when I talk to healthcare professionals because you go to school years upon years upon years and you become this wonderful doctor and you have such specific expertise, and then you open up the doors and you're like, okay, now how do I run a business again? How do I market? How do I handle the finances? Who's going to help me in each avenue of running a successful practice? So talk to me a little bit more about the systems that you help put in place for practitioners out there.
Well, a big piece of it is people can do their own insurance billing or can outsource it. If they don't, whoever's doing it has to really stay on top of it. One of the things that I found with private practices, especially smaller ones, is that their office manager, their people are doing 27 things at once, and they're running so many different things, it is hard to stay on top of every last detail. And if you don't stay on top of the details with insurance billing, you end up running out of time and leaving money on the table. These days, with the impact of COVID-19, nobody can afford to leave any money on the table.
Yeah, I mean, one of the reasons why we can't leave money on the table is because we don't have enough people coming through the doors, which is the framework for our conversation. Ken and I started discussing this a couple of weeks ago of the biggest problem right now that you're seeing with your clients is how do we as practitioners keep ourselves safe, keep our staff safe, and then how do we ensure our patients are safe and that they acknowledge that and we're communicating what we're doing to make sure that they have an easy and reliable time in our office. And if you had to answer those concerns, because it's heavy, right? Nowadays, everyone's trying to figure out, how am I going to handle school districts reopening? How do we handle our office reopening? What do you say to your clients in one sentence? How do you reaffirm them that everything is going to be okay?
Well, it's got to be a balance between keeping patients and staff as separate as possible, both time and physically, and yet still being able to get them in to see the doctor, because you need to run a practice. There are a lot of patients you do have to see in person. You can do telemedicine, and you must do telemedicine, but you can't do every visit that way. Um, and you want to maximize the number of patients that you can fit into the office in the new paradigm without jeopardizing anybody's safety.
So you created a list for your clients, and it goes through the 5 touch points of how they get communicated with staff, how they communicate with staff members, from the time that they call to make an appointment all the way through the follow-up. And that's the framework we're going to have today for our conversation, is what are those ideas, that 5-step plan that you offered your clients on the best ways to minimize exposure and also help people feel safe and want to go to the doctor. So let's go ahead and start with that pre-visit touch point of, you get the phone call, hi, blah, 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 when can I come in? How do you advise your client to deal with that pre-visit?
Well, basically, advice is to do whatever you can possibly do by phone or video before the visit, so that that eliminates excess time spent by the patient in the practice. Right. So, for example, we'll get to the tail end first, but an obvious one would be paperwork. You want to get all the questions answered, anything that the patient might have sat in the waiting room and filled out paperwork, you want to do that in advance. Sometimes that might be just pointing the patient to a portal where they can fill out a document online. But even if that isn't possible, because some people aren't computer savvy and comfortable there, you could have the nurse or receptionist or whoever in the office is making a call to the patient to talk them through and collect all that data. It is a little bit more labor consumptive than it would have been before the days of COVID-19, but it's still a lot more efficient to do it that way than to have them sitting in an office potentially interacting with other patients or staff. So you want to triage. You want a nurse to be able to figure out if they call, say, I want an appointment. You want to be able to determine, is this something that can or should be handled by telehealth, in which case we don't have a physical visit, or is this something that somebody really needs to come in for? And only the nurse who's been trained by their physician is in a position to make those determinations, right? So they determine that, and then once it's determined that someone is going to come in, you do the paperwork beforehand. Ideally, you collect credit card information so that you can do the payments without any touch. So you can collect the payments after the visit. You're not doing it in advance, but you can collect it after the visit without having the patient come out of the examination room and then stand in front of the desk and fill out paperwork or give them their card. And that's just another physical interaction that you can eliminate if you take care of it at home. So they're home.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that is the easiest way. If they could get all of that credit card information into the system, it stays on file and they get billed without even having to deal with any paperwork. However, if that is not an option, 2 other ideas is having that, and we've seen it, right? That dirty pen pile and the clean pen pile. These are the clean ones, and then you put them into the dirty pile once you finish signing paperwork. Or if you are on the electronic keypad, to make sure that your front receptionist is literally cleaning that pen, the electronic pen, in front of the patient who is paying, so that they know I didn't just touch somebody else's dirty pen. So there are options out there to deal with payment, but obviously the best one is if you could get that credit card up front. So the pre-visit is so important to minimize that time in the waiting room. We've seen multiple different ways waiting rooms have changed since March.
Yeah.
Tell me what you're seeing out there.
Well, the simplest way is taping off or removing every other chair or every third 2 out of 3 chairs to try to maintain 6 foot distance. But a better thing is to just eliminate as much overlap between patients in the waiting room as possible. And one of the ways people are doing that is actually, if you're in the suburbs, it's easy. You can have people wait in their cars. Mm-hmm. It depends, of course, on the climate where you're in,
right,
or if it's pouring rain outside. But people could actually wait in their cars. Some practices have done that, and then they will, with a cell phone, they will call the patient and say, hey, okay, now the doctor is ready to see you. So that eliminates a lot of potential cross, call it contamination, or cross infection between patients. Let's see. So that's one, get them out of there completely. Another thing that a lot of practices implement is nobody but the patient comes into the waiting room or enters the practice. Now, exceptions have to be made if you're a pediatrician. Mom has got to come in with the little kids. That's just the way it's got to be. Or sometimes people are in need of physical assistance and they have someone to help with that. And so an exception does have to be made. But for most patients, if they're driven by somebody, a family member, a friend, whatever, that other person does not actually have to physically be in the office. And they shouldn't be. A lot of practices will then meet, so that's for isolation. Then a lot of practices will meet the incoming patient outside the front door and do a triage there. Some will take a touchless temperature. They will and treat them differently if they believe they might have COVID-19 or if they think they're clear. And everybody wears a mask inside the office. They will ask patients to bring their own mask, but if possible, they will provide a mask to every patient who comes if they don't have their own. With PPE shortages, it's not clear every practice is not in a position to provide that, but where possible, that's something that they do. And then if logistics support it, I know some practices that bring people in through a completely different pathway, different doorways, then they exit the practice.
Smart.
Now,
a lot of people won't be able to handle that, though, logistically.
Your office is set up that way, great, but you're not going to change your real estate at this point to make that happen.
What do you think about scheduling a way where the appointments are staggered throughout your day to minimize just the cross exposure of people coming in and coming out? How are you guiding your clients that way?
Well, that's a major thing. Practices, in order to eliminate overlap of patients, a lot of practices that might have operated on 15 or 20 minute schedule of patient to patient to patient are now on 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And what that does, of course, is it spaces out the patients. It keeps patients from overlapping physically in the office. The problem for doctors, of course, is that they can only see half as many patients in the office. So there's a couple of things. I suggest that they actually stagger them with telehealth visits. Everybody is doing telehealth visits. Maybe it's not half of your practice, but it's still a more significant portion than it was before. And if you set up and schedule telehealth visits in between the physical visits, now that 30-minute spacing is no longer has the same kind of financial impact on your practice. But one thing that people can do, and it depends on the tools that are available, but by effective communication, reminders, and status with the patients, if you can get the patients to show up on time, right? The better you can get the patients to show up on time, and the better you can keep to your own time schedule, the more you have the opportunity to potentially take that 30 minutes and drop it down to 25 or even 20. You want to still maintain the isolation, but that allows you to fit in more patients during the workday. Because the alternative is either to see fewer patients or to run a longer workday, which is tough on everybody.
Yeah, I mean, you can't create time in the day. It's 24 hours for everybody. So you really just have to be more efficient in the logistics and in the appointment taking for each, and then the duration of each appointment. So you brought up something that's a sweet spot for me, because considering that I handle on-camera work and video marketing for practices, tell me your thoughts on telehealth as we propelled into telehealth like never before. What is the future, and how can practices who are eerie about it, don't feel like the billing logistics have been laid out clearly, what can they do right now to wrap their heads around telehealth and get better prepared within their practice?
All right. So telehealth used to be, I don't know, 3 to 5% max of the overall visits. And when COVID-19 hit, CMS basically issued a new set of guidelines. Because they knew practices were hurt. They didn't want patients coming into practices if they didn't have to, if they could be served by telehealth, because they didn't want patients getting sick. And they also didn't want doctors going out of business because they were doing no business at all. And so CMS basically relaxed a whole bunch of regulations at once. They increased the Medicare reimbursements for telehealth visits to be equal to the equivalent kind of visit. It used to be much lower. And so now if you do we'll call it an office visit, but you do it by Zoom or telehealth, you get reimbursed for the same amount as you would have if that patient had come into the office. Right? So they pushed that out really quickly. They also, not CMS, but another government office said, we are going to curtail some of our HIPAA enforcement activities. And basically they wanted patients to stop coming into doctors' offices but still receive medical care, and they wanted doctors to still be able to stay in business. And these two things, basically they said, you can use Zoom, you can use Apple FaceTime. They still left a few restrictions on things you could do, but they opened the gates to a lot of different systems. That was then. Still covers the case now. However, they were trying very quickly with changes almost on a day-to-day basis to help both doctors and patients deal with COVID-19. Nobody expects this new set of regulations to stay the way they are. By the same token, nobody expects them to go back completely to where they were. So I said it was, maybe 2 to 5% telehealth beforehand. The general expectation is that when all of this settles, even when COVID-19 is history, we're probably going to be about in the 30% of your visits are going to be telehealth. And the reason is that having tried it, doctors don't mind so much, and patients like it. And, the cork's out of that bottle. That's not going to go back.
So if you're, I'm sorry, let me just squeeze in, because I want to know, when it comes to HIPAA and telehealth, are there restrictions of where these video phone calls can be taking place to maintain the privacy of the patient? I know you can't be in the middle of the front desk holding up your phone, FaceTiming with the patient. So talk to us a little bit about logistically and physically where these conversations could take place so that they are HIPAA compliant.
So HIPAA, you could do these things from home, but you have to pay attention that they're not within earshot of other people. You can't have your computer screen someplace that, assuming you're doing it on that and not on a phone, you can't have that someplace that family members or other people in your house could see it. Same token in the office. I mean, in the office, telehealth is the physical locations are easier in that if a computer sits on a desk in an exam room or the doctor's office, that's every bit as private as it would have been without telehealth. So that part is okay. However, there are certain things. So Zoom, FaceTime, that is not compliant.
Right.
So CMS issued a waiver and said, we're not going to, not CMS, one of the other government offices issued a waiver, and Office of Civil Rights basically said, we're not going to enforce that. But they didn't repeal the rules. And so everybody expects those rules to be coming back. What you need is a platform that has been designed for telehealth from the beginning. And there are a number of them out there. I'm not going to mention any by name in this, brief interview, but basically, even the payers. So right now, you put down a visit, you code it as an office visit, and you put the I'm drawing a blank on the modification code to basically say it was actually a telehealth visit, and all the payers are saying, yeah, okay, because they want to get money out right now. Again, that's not going to stay. To do telehealth in the future, and the future might start in a few months, you're going to have to be able to have better documentation of how long, how many minutes the visit was, who initiated it, what the circumstances of, behind that were. And Zoom, FaceTime we're not built with that kind of information backup in mind, whereas these telehealth platforms were built with that in mind. So they will track that, they will tie into your EHR, sometimes they're a part of the existing EHR, and so they will track that, and that information will be highly relevant to making sure that you get paid and don't suffer badly in an audit if someone comes back and says, did you do this telehealth visit right? So telehealth going forward is not going to be that difficult, but you're going to have to put systems in place that really support telehealth.
Yeah, and
but there's also.
But I just want to run down those systems just off the top of our heads. So I work well with lists. Don't you love lists, Ken? I think it's easy to remember lists, right? So if your office, you identify your office as, listen, we're not up to speed on telehealth the way we need to be in the future here, because as we've learned, 30% of our visits are going to be telehealth in the future. We need to do the following. A, we need to invest in a telehealth platform, whichever one that may be best for your office. Two, we need to make sure that when we book these telehealth appointments, we need access to a room that is enclosed so that we could have private conversations and live up to HIPAA regulations that are eased right now but will not be eased forever. And then three, we need to prep ourselves for, if the platform fails, what information can we jot down so that we are working off of a template of duration of the visit, reason for the visit, and what was suggested within the visit. Same as the medical report that I get after I go through a visit with my doctor. Here's what we did today, or a receipt of sorts before we leave the office. So right away, those are three things that you could be doing right now to get telehealth ready for the future, instead of scrambling on FaceTime or Zoom, et cetera, to figure out a video call for patients. So I think that those are really three key things that office administrators that need to be aware of, to invest in, to get their particular situation in office up to speed. Because you had a great point. It's never going to be the same as it was in January 2020. We are light years ahead of the situation when it comes to telehealth, because we're forced there. So I just wanted to reiterate those points, because I think it's a great strategy, a great game plan if you're not up to par yet. So a couple of things to remember. I cut you off, Ken. I know that you were eager to add one more detail.
It's okay, but the staff needs to be trained if they're working from home. So the first thing we talked about was triage from home and calling the patient at home. But your staff could be making that call from home which eliminates another set of interactions within the office. But if they're working from home, they need to be trained on the HIPAA issues relevant to now having some patient data at home, and they have to protect it in the same manner as it would have been protected inside the office. If you're in telehealth, there are actually a couple of other opportunities. Some of the platforms allow you to do remote patient monitoring and continuous care, chronic care management. And these are a couple of other things that someone other in the office, other than the doctor, can actually do with a call or video that that provides other revenue opportunities for the practice. You're all about communication. I'm all about communication here. I think the thing that makes patients most comfortable coming in is not telling them, "Oh, we're taking care of a lot of things to keep you safe." I think it's more a matter of telling, we're doing this to keep you safe. We're doing that to keep you safe. We're doing all these things outside the office to keep you safe. And then once you're in there, we're doing these things to keep you safe. Those build so much confidence in the patient. If you can imagine, patients are afraid to go to the grocery store for fear they might catch COVID-19. How would they feel about coming and sitting in a doctor's waiting room? Obviously, they'd be that much more concerned. And so doctors who can communicate to their patients that these are all the things we're doing to make sure that our practice is safe for you to visit, those are the doctors that are going to make out. Those are the doctors who are going to get through this better than those who don't communicate as well.
And I think that it's also important to understand who your patients are, what age bracket they're in, what message resonates for that particular group. So if you are a macular degeneration eye clinic and you have to see people to put in those special eye drops every single week or every single month, the way that you communicate to your patients is going to be drastically different than the people who are in orthopedics, who are dealing with a younger group who are familiar with messages and being communicated with via video, right? So I think that that's also a differentiator right there of how are you choosing a vessel for these ideas to be communicated. It's course, this is my jam, Ken. So
yeah, well, and I don't claim to be an expert in everything. So when something is outside of my expertise, of course, I'm going to tell somebody where to get the expertise.
Yeah.
And in this case, if somebody is willing to do advertising of some sort, then, video is one of the options on the table.
Right.
One of the things they consider.
Well, I always tell people that if they want to do something just so easy, literally taking your phone and creating a video of your space when it's closed, there's no patients inside, walking them through what you've done in each juncture of that journey that you laid out of intake, the time in the office, and then when you leave the office, if they could video that and put it together, a wonderful marketing piece to add to an email marketing campaign that goes out to all of your patients. Very easy. It wouldn't take any longer than the duration of each part of your office getting filmed. I mean, that's one idea to leave people with. Another idea is what you were mentioning in regards to communication of getting emails out there, social media. I mean, I think that the messaging of COVID, that could be a whole other conversation. But I love the concrete ideas that you're offering for office administrators on just how to deal with the logistics of what do we do? We have 500 square feet of space. We have X amount of patients. How are we logistically going to do this? So Ken, tell people where they could find you and your expertise and who you service so that people could get a hold of you.
All right. Well, it's Ken Stern at great-practices.com. That's my email. On my website, www.great-practices.com. My number is 800-324-0804. And I can give you my cell, but basically I'm in the Massachusetts area. Most of my clients are in New England, but I'm talking to clients in Florida. I have a client in New Jersey. So as I said, a lot of what I do can be delivered. Not everything, but a lot of what I can help practices with can be delivered at a distance. Right now with COVID-19, I'm just talking to people. I'm not charging anybody for a conversation. I'm talking to people, brainstorming how they can help their practice get through this. There is a new normal coming, and what we're in right now isn't it yet, but they have to get through what's now and then be ready and adapt to the new status quo.
Yeah. I got to give you a shout out because, like I said at the top of this conversation, we connected via LinkedIn. This is on LinkedIn Live at this very moment. And the bio that you changed for your LinkedIn profile says just that you are foregoing any sales during COVID-19, that you are here as a resource, brainstorming. So kudos to you for taking that stand just to be of service to the people that you want to help the most.
What goes around comes around. I mean, you got to do what's right. The doctors are on the front lines, and I thank them for their service. And in order to keep my clients functioning, I have to research and read and watch webinars and just constantly to keep up with all the latest impact. And doctors don't have time to do that. There's no reason I should restrict the benefits of that to my clients. I mean, anybody that is willing or interested in talking to me, I'm happy to talk to about it because it's just
you're a good guy. Just say it, Ken. You're a good guy.
You can say that about themselves.
No,
Thank you.
You really are. And I, like I said, connected with you via LinkedIn, but you entertained my phone call. We were on the phone for quite some time, brainstorming different ideas of how to best serve the people in the healthcare industry. So I appreciate you. I appreciate your expertise. Thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday.
Thank you for making the time, and I really appreciate being invited on.
Okay, and for those of you who are listening right now, I mentioned that Ken had a PDF about how to go about in putting all of this information into your practice and making it work for you. If you are interested in that, Ken, would you be able to share that with them?
Absolutely.
Yep, I figured you would. Or you could hop online and go to my website as well, and I could share that on behalf of Ken if you don't mind, Ken. We probably should have talked about that ahead of time.
I should have talked about that. I don't remember my exact LinkedIn address.
Well,
But
Ken Stern, that's all people need to know. Put it in the search engine. You're up in Boston. They'll find you. Or you could go to my website, www.michelleburdo.com, MICHELLEBURDO. It's at the bottom of your screen right now. Sign up for any of the 5-minute video makeovers, media training courses, or keynote presentations. And if you are interested in that PDF, shoot me an email and I will go ahead and get it to you. And if you want, I can also have this entire recording sent to you as well if you want to share it with staff members that may not be online at this moment. Ken, thank you so much. I appreciate you. I hope the rain stops in Boston.
Both of us, yeah.
It is going strong here in Orlando.
Thank you, Michelle.
All right. Bye, guys. Have a great Wednesday, and we'll see you next week.